I'll give you an example why I think billionaires are a problem. This country's public school system has been hopefully not fatally derailed because of an experiment that the Gateses did. They sunk about $750 million, probably about $1 billion directly, and then multiple billions other sort of like subsidiarily into an experiment in this country for education. It was done primarily up in the Northwest, but it changed the whole trajectory of education in this country. Value added, high stakes testing, all of this. Obama's Secretary of Education pursued this. In New York, we had high stakes testing, et cetera, et cetera. In 2017, okay, this for 2 decades, shoved a lot of teachers out of the industry, people who love to teach. 2017, 2018, the Gateses hired the Rand Corporation to make an assessment of their almost 20-year project, which derailed education in this country. And the Rand Corporation said unequivocally, big mistake. Should have listened to educators. And basically, the problem with billionaires is that on a whim, whether his intentions are good or bad or whatever, it doesn't matter. No one should have the ability to impact society in that way unilaterally.
Neither should
we don't have kings.
But
we don't have kings.
Right.
We live in the best system that we possibly can have, which is at this point, which is like as much democracy, and we could have a little bit more, right? There's still some minoritarian aspects of what we're going through, but democracy is better. It involves more stakeholders in it. It brings more people in who have investments in this. You cannot have one person decide on a whim, I'm going to derail public education in this country for decades. You just can't have that. We got rid of oligarchs when we got rid of kings.
What are your thoughts on Musk, what he's doing, his impact, Twitter, Elon Musk, period? What are your thoughts about him?
I don't know, double the amount of anti-Semitism, according to a report, 40% loss of ad revenue as of December. He's got problems with the Tesla. And I think that he's admitted that his whole Hyperloop stuff was just a way to crash public transportation. He wanted to crash that high-speed rail. He successfully helped derail it. I think that's not in the best interest of society.
Is he a net positive to society?
No.
Come on.
You don't think so?
You don't think he's a net positive to society?
No.
So what do you think about all his Twitter files and all the showing the people what the government and everybody's really doing behind the scenes?
I think he selectively leaked stuff on Twitter files. I think it's a problem when the president of the United States tries to silence somebody. They did this with the Smothers Brothers. Nixon did it back in the day. I mean, but I don't think that we see the whole story about what's going on there.
Oh, I agree with that.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
He's going to do what's in his interests, right? I mean, he's going to release what's in his best interest to release. I'm sorry, this is a private company. As a business guy, I'm sure your public relations people called up local Channel 5 and said, don't run that story.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. Should the government be doing it? Absolutely not. But could Twitter have announced something? Could Twitter at that time?
Why doesn't the Democratic Party, instead of trying to just go after Trump with all this false bullshit that is making his base riled up, find a candidate, a viable, likable candidate, to go against this guy so they don't have to do all this FBI bullshit, trying to get the guy. Why not have a good person to go against him is what I'm asking.
I don't understand when people characterize it as the Democrats doing this. Like Alan Bragg is a Democrat, but what is the DNC or Joe Biden supposed to do about a Manhattan DA? What is he supposed to do about all the prosecutors in Georgia who are Republicans? I mean, that's the real case. That's the real dangerous one.
I fully agree with the Georgia case.
Yeah, Georgia's a whole different situation.
Yeah, and listen, if Trump had just returned the frickin' documents when he found them and when he was asked, I mean, they were asking him for months and months and months, just give us the documents back. He wouldn't do it. And the guy wouldn't do it. He lied to his own attorneys about having them. He'd be fine. Nobody cared about that. The whole thing was the cover-up, essentially, in that case. I mean, I don't think Democrats want to focus on Donald Trump.
Are you in favor of the amount of support we're giving Ukraine right now?
I'm of two minds of it. I mean, I think obviously we need to provide them some support, but I do worry about how deep our engagement gets. Yeah. I think that if you're Putin, you're waiting to see if Donald Trump becomes president, because if Donald Trump becomes president, then you're quite confident that all the funding is going to dry up and you stay into that war. The dilemma that the Biden administration has is they have to show overwhelming commitment that would surpass, that would go beyond even if Donald Trump becomes president,
If Putin is waiting for Trump to become president because the funding would dry up for Ukraine and get weaker, why didn't he attack Ukraine under Trump? Because he would have never supported Ukraine.
He thought that he could get Ukraine without having to be military and go in militarily. Look, we made a deal with Ukraine in '93. Give up your nukes, and we will protect you. And this is not a fight that the United States picked. I am someone who felt like we shouldn't expand NATO. In fact, I think I was somebody who was feeling like we can start to sort of maybe disengage on some level in NATO. That is now obviously off the table because, Putin, if he was worried about NATO, that was the worst thing he could have possibly done, it seems to me, was to give everybody in Europe a reason to be supportive of NATO.
Are politicians better at making decisions on what to do with our money, or are we?
If we're going to look at the biggest chunk of money in the government to make this assessment, right? $1.7 trillion, Social Security. And we can compare it to the one sort of like comparable thing in the private sector, and that's a 401k. I would have to say, I mean, just based upon the way you've set up this question, that obviously the government, because Social Security has been the single most effective program that we have in this country. It has kept 2/3 of our senior citizens out of poverty as a social insurance program. 401ks have been a disaster. They've been a disaster. Just Google right there in front of you, the 401k experiment. People took the money out. I mean, and grant you, you can make an assessment that these individuals were stupid or immoral or whatever it is. I'm looking at the goal of keeping senior citizens out of poverty. The government has been able to do that far more effectively. 2/3 of our seniors are in nursing homes because the government is paying for it. You can look around at anything that doesn't involve a profit motive. Like, for instance, the post office. If we didn't have a government-run post office, do you think you could live in, the most rural parts of the country and get postal service for 42 cents or 48 cents? You can send a letter? No way. What person looking to make a profit would do that? I was doing radio during Katrina, and there was a story that haunted me for years and years. Bill Clinton, I'm not a huge fan of Bill Clinton's administration, frankly, but one of the things he did do well was to build up FEMA. I guess having come from Arkansas, he had a pretty good sense of what was important there. And Bush, when he came in very early on, privatized a ton of it. There was a story, it was a very small story, in New Orleans. The buses that were supposed to come to New Orleans to evacuate people before Katrina hit, there was a whole ton of buses that went through 3 different contractors, right? There was like a general contractor and then a subcontractor, and another subcontractor was going to bring the buses. They were from like 3 or 4 hours away. And maybe it was 6 hours. I can't remember the exact details. They were going to send the buses, but the guy whose job it was, who owns the bus company, and then the contractor above that, they waited longer, because if you send the buses and they're not used, they're going to eat that cost, right? It's going to cut into their profits. They didn't send the buses. They didn't get there in time. People couldn't get evacuated. Would it have changed the trajectory of the thing? I doubt it, but it would have saved some people.